Hello, my name is Will Kassane, and I am Executive Director of Financial Aid at the College of New Jersey. This is a pre-recorded financial aid presentation. The main audience for this presentation are current high school seniors, but that does not mean that this is not of benefit to underclassmen, freshmen, juniors, and seniors. This is a good prep for you if you want to listen to the presentation. The presentation, a copy of it will be sent to your school as well as a hard copy. I'm sure the guidance office will make it available to you. Also, at the very end, we have a question and answer session. But since this is a pre-recorded session, what I'm going to ask you is if you have any questions after this presentation, please forward those to your guidance department, and then they can forward those to me for a response. Okay. So with that, we will get started. So what are we going to cover tonight? We are going to cover the types and sources of financial aid, the application process, the financial aid package, and then other useful information. But before we start, every college and university in the United States is required to have what's called a net price calculator. Different colleges and universities may use a different title. Some of them may call it a college affordability estimator, college cost estimator, but the bottom line is they all do the same thing. Basically, it's a 5-minute mini application for financial aid that you would complete at the school's website. And it tells you what the average first-time, full-time degree-seeking candidate at their school is receiving in financial aid. So again, an incoming freshman who is full-time, what's the average financial aid package they're receiving at their school? The nice thing about doing this is, and what I would probably recommend is, as you narrow your college search down to, let's say, your top 3 schools or maybe even 5 schools, go out to each one of the schools' websites and find their net price calculator and take the time to complete it. Okay, like I said, it may take you like 5 minutes to do each one. And it gives you an idea of how generous that school is with their financial aid or how limited they are with their funding. And it may help shape the conversation between the student and the parent in regards to affordability at that school. So again, I recommend you go out, hunt it out, take advantage of it. It's a nice tool, and each college is required to have this. So section 1, what are we going to cover? We are going to cover the sources of aid and the types of financial aid. So this is probably one of the most important slides in the presentation. If you were to look on the left-hand side of the slide, you see there the different sources of aid. You see federal, you see state of New Jersey, and you see the college and university. I'll talk about outside organizations in a second, okay? And then on the right, you see the types of financial aid: grants, scholarships, loans, and employment opportunities. What happens is when you apply for financial aid, when you complete your FAFSA, your free application for federal student aid, which we're going to cover in the next section, that FAFSA information is being sent to the sources of aid that you see on the left-hand side of the slide, okay? That FAFSA is going to the federal government for processing, it's going to the state of New Jersey for processing, and it's being sent to each college or university that you designate on the FAFSA, again, for processing. What are each of those entities on the left doing? They are evaluating you for the types of financial aid that you see on the right-hand side. They will be evaluating you for grants, scholarships, loans, and employment opportunities through the federal work-study program. Now, the only one there that's a bit of an outlier, like I mentioned before, it's on the left there, is the outside organizations. Outside organizations do not automatically receive your FAFSA data. But as you apply for private scholarships through outside organizations, they may ask for your FAFSA data. Each student, when they complete their FAFSA application, they're going to receive via the email they used on their FAFSA the results of that FAFSA. They're going to receive a summary of the results of that FAFSA. A scholarship entity may say, please forward to us the results of that FAFSA as part of your evaluation process for a scholarship. Again, it would be a separate process. It's not sent automatically. and that would only apply if you were applying for a private scholarship and that entity requested the data. But again, the FAFSA information will automatically be sent to the sources of aid that you see on the left, and you will be evaluated for the types of financial aid that you see on the right. I'm going to give you some examples of the types of financial aid that are available. So the federal government, and these would be need-based grants. So as you fill out the FAFSA based on household size, income, assets, et cetera, they would evaluate you for need-based grants from the federal government. Their signature program is the federal Pell Grant. You see the maximum award there is $6,345. These awards would be subject to change for the 21-22 academic year. These are current 2020-2021 academic year awards. FSCOG stands for Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, and those are funds that the federal government gives each college and university, and then they would determine based on the FAFSA results if you meet the eligibility criteria. Again, these are need-based grants, so it's based on the information that you put on the FAFSA. Federal Work Study, that is basically, it's an award that is given to you as a student, and then you earn that award by working a job on campus. Now, as you see there, I said no limit. You know, there's basically the limit is set by the school depending on how much funding they receive from the federal government, you know, what kind of jobs you have on campus, what the hourly pay is, and how many hours per week the particular college allows you to work. But again, it's just a nice option for you to be able to receive that award and then, you know, work a job to get that funding. Keep in mind, the one nice thing also about federal work study is that any money that you earn through the federal work study program is exempt from the eligibility calculation for the following year. So unlike a regular job where you may have to file income tax return, it goes on your FAFSA. This funding, you have to indicate it on your FAFSA, but then it's offset in another area. So any money that you earn on a work study job, it doesn't count towards any future eligibility. State of New Jersey. Now, the state of New Jersey, very generous with their aid program. They have various programs. The state of New Jersey has programs that are need-based only, programs that are merit-based, and then programs that are a combination of the two. The signature program for the state of New Jersey is called the Full-Time TAG Program. That stands for Tuition Aid Grant. And again, by filling out the FAFSA, that FAFSA information is being sent to the state of New Jersey for evaluation for these programs. Some of the programs may require additional information from the student in order to be evaluated, but at least you know that that FAFSA is the anchor document to be sent to the state and to be reviewed for a lot of these programs. You also see the programs have different, you know, titles, different eligibility amounts. What I've done is I have included a slide for each one of these programs that describes the eligibility criteria for each, okay, and whether they're a need-based, merit-based, or a combination program. Obviously, for time purposes, I don't want to go through each of those slides, but know that, again, I will send this presentation to your individual school so you can refer back to them in terms of the individual eligibility criteria for each program. So again, as I mentioned, there's the Signature Tuition Aid Grant Program. That is a need-based grant program, and you see here some of the eligibility criteria for that program. There is a part-time tuition aid grant program for county colleges if you're planning on attending a county college. There's also another program called Educational Opportunity Fund. And again, that is a need-based grant. You see award ranges there and you know, some of the criteria. You have a Governor's Urban Scholarship that is need and merit because, you know, you have to have need, but also you have to have graduated within a certain percentage of eligibility of your high school class or at the end of the junior year. We have the NJ STARS program, which is the program where if you graduate from your high school, the top 15% of your class, you can attend your local community college tuition free for approximately 2.5 years. And if you graduate from there with a 3.0 or better, you can then transfer to a 4-year school in New Jersey and receive $2,500 annually, $2,500 for your junior year and $2,500 for your senior year at that 4-year New Jersey College University. And again, these are merit, but there is a bit of a need criteria there. In other words, you see there for the NJ STARS too, if you look at the slide, the household income must be less than $250,000 a year to be eligible for that. There's also a governor's industry and vocation scholarship for women and minorities, and these are women and minorities who are thinking of going into some kind of trade, construction trade, solar trade, architecture technology. You see some examples there at the very end. There's also a community college opportunity grant, CCOG, and that is a need-based grant. And you see that there's certain income criteria for that one. So again, that main slide that I showed you has all these programs listed on it with the award ranges, and then each one of these slides covers each one of these programs specifically. But again, keep in mind that by completing the FAFSA, that is the anchor document that will be sent to the state of New Jersey to be evaluated for eligibility to these programs. Student loans. Now, I'm going to spend a little time on this slide, but usually one question that I get when I'm doing this presentation, if we were doing it live, is, well, Will, you gave me some examples of need-based grants, and we think we make too much money. We're not going to qualify for some of those grants. So why do a FAFSA? I always recommend that you do a FAFSA, no matter what. Even if you're not sure, if you're going to qualify or you think your income is too high, you should still do one. And here's some of the reasons why. This slide is the first one, okay? If you are counting on having to borrow on student loans during your college career, or your freshman year or at any time, you will need to complete a FAFSA in order to apply for those loans. So that's reason number one, okay? And that stands for whether it's a loan for the student, a loan for the parent, or a combination of them both, okay? Also, as you'll see once we get a couple of more slides ahead, in terms of institutional merit and need-based aid, a lot of colleges and universities require the FAFSA in order to be evaluated for any institutional funding. So again, even though you may be on the fence, you're not sure, I always recommend that you complete the FAFSA because it opens up avenues for other types of financial aid beyond just need-based aid from the federal or state government. So again, here's the first one. So by completing the FAFSA, all students, regardless of income, household income, will be eligible for federal loans. The federal loans currently for this year are at a 2.75% interest rate. These are loans that are in the student's name only, so the parents are not involved with this loan or repaying it or anything like that. And there is no credit check for this loan. So the student, by completing the FAFSA and meeting the eligibility criteria for FAFSA, will automatically be eligible for this funding. The way these loans work is while the student is in school, the principal is deferred on this loan. They actually do not begin repayment on that principal until 6 months either after they graduate from college or they stop attending. So, again, even though it's a loan, it is considered part of financial aid because that principal is deferred, and also because of the competitive interest rate and the repayment programs that are available. Now, the difference is there are two types of loans here, okay? So they both fall under that federal direct loan or Stafford loan, or, they go by different names, but federal undergraduate direct loans. And again, on both of these, the principal is deferred, but on one of them, it's called the subsidized loan. This one, the federal government is paying the interest while the student is in school. So on that one, subsidized, principal and interest is deferred while the student is in school. There's also an unsubsidized direct loan. And on that one, again, principal is deferred, the interest becomes due immediately, all right? And the student can either opt to make quarterly payments per year on that interest or defer, capitalize that interest until they begin repayment of the loan. That is something that if you, once you get to that point, if you want to take advantage of these loans, I always recommend that you meet with the financial aid office at your individual school, and they can kind of give you more information on how these loan works, on repayments, things like that, options that would be available to you. But again, just keep in mind that by completing the FAFSA, the student will be automatically eligible for these loans. The amounts are a little low. I won't lie to you there. So if you looked at this, you would see that a freshman student would be eligible for as high as $5,500 in this type of loan, in this federal undergraduate direct loan. And again, you see there, it says max 3,500 subsidized. That's the one that principal is deferred and interest is paid by the government. The difference, or the 2,000 in the case of a freshman, that's the one that principal is deferred, but then the student would have to make payments on that interest unless they capitalize it while the student is in school. And then you see also there that, as the student progresses, through grade levels, when they become a sophomore, the loan amount increases to 6,500. For juniors and seniors, it goes up to 7,500, and they do have cumulative limits. You see also there that there's a box that says dependent undergraduate and another one that says independent undergraduate with different amounts. When you're completing the FAFSA is going to ask the student a series of questions, which is going to determine whether they're categorized as a dependent or independent student. And then thus that would determine, the award amounts. The school, once they receive the FAFSA data, they will tell you whether you qualify for the subsidized, the unsubsidized, or both. Okay, so again, that FAFSA is taking care of all of this. The school will let you know which one you qualify for. But again, it's a viable option that is available to students. In this slide, we start getting into student and parent loans. Now, these are a little stricter. Unlike the loan that you saw in the previous slide, which is in the students only with no credit check, these are loans that require a credit check, okay? In almost all cases, these loans require that the student complete the FAFSA. Again, they are student loans. The first one that we're going to cover is one that either the parent and or the student can borrow, okay? And this is the New Jersey State NJ Class Supplemental Loan Program. You're going to find in financial aid that everything is an acronym, okay? So this is basically the state of New Jersey's signature loan program. Administered through HESA. They're the state authority, the New Jersey State Authority that prepares this presentation for me. We use all their resources, and they're the ones who basically kind of like hire us to go out and give these financial aid presentations. And I'm going to have their information a little later during these slides. But basically, the state of New Jersey loan program, very flexible in terms of, again, whether the student applies for the loan program, whether the parent applies, or whether they both do. And what do I mean by that? So what happens in a lot of cases is, since this is a credit-based loan, the student applies for this loan through the state of New Jersey. The state of New Jersey evaluates them, and since it is a credit-based loan, they may not qualify. Their credit is just not there yet. They don't have established credit. So the state of New Jersey may say, well, you can either have your parent or a guardian co-sign for you, or perhaps they may want to borrow on your behalf. So that's why you kind of have that option, whether it's student, parent, or either one, depending on the credit. Also, the really nice thing about the New Jersey State product is they have a lot of options available to students and parents. They have a 10-year fixed rate option, a 15-year option, a 20-year option. They have different repayment options. Again, on that 10, 15, or 20 year. There's options where you can pay the full principal and interest while the student is in school. There's one where it's just interest while the student is in school. And then there's another option that you can defer everything until after the student graduates from school. So again, as you're planning, you're doing your budgeting, we'll get to the award notices in the third section. This is a loan option that has a lot of flexibilities for you as a family. So it's something to consider. The next one is only a parent can borrow on this option. And that one is called a federal plus loan. That stands for parent loan for undergraduate student. This is only in the parent's name. It is, again, a credit-based loan. The parent is actually borrowing for the student in this case. Repayment begins immediately. So unlike the state of New Jersey product where you may be able to pay just interest while in school or defer the principal and interest until after the student is done with school, on that one, repayment does begin immediately. So as soon as you begin to receive funding from the federal government to help pay for the studies, then repayment will have to begin. And the repayment on that one, although there is a 10-year repayment option, you can extend that up till 25-year repayment option. And again, the current interest rate on that is 5.3%. And then finally, there are parent and student loan, again, that you can borrow, and through private educational entities, like, whether it's a company like Sallie Mae, or a bank like Wells Fargo or PNC, or your local bank, TD Bank, or Bank of America, whatever, you know, a lot of institutions also lend out money to students for educational purposes. You know, the reason that, you know, we put it on the slides, besides you knowing what your different options are, is because, for example, you may have a relationship with a private bank. You may have your mortgage through them. You may have your line of credit. You may have your business through them. We always recommend, you know, go out and shop around. Perhaps when you go to your private bank, you have a relationship with them, you have excellent credit. They may say, well, you know, we offer a more competitive product than perhaps the federal government does, or the state of New Jersey does, a lower interest rate or better repayment. So that's why we put this out there to be fully transparent. You know, you do have options through the state, you have options through the federal government, but you also have options through private lending institutions. So when, you know, you go out there, we always recommend, please shop around to see what the best option is for you, okay? And now you'll notice that, you know, again, I spent a lot of time on that student loan slide, you know, from the federal government, the slide before this, and I also spent time on this slide. And look, the bottom line is, the reason I do spend a little bit more time on this is because whether you qualify for full grants, whether they're merit or they're need-based, and even if you're, you know, your parents are going to be able to pay a portion of your schooling, what we find is a lot of the time nowadays, most families need to borrow on a student loan product, even if it's just to supplement or to add on to whatever other aid that they're receiving, or whatever other spending they were willing they had saved up and were willing to pay. Okay, it's almost you know, the reality of it. So that's why I spent a little bit more time on the student loans, so that way when that time comes and you're evaluating your aid packages, you know, you spend as much time evaluating, if you have to borrow on a loan, what is the right loan for the student and for the family. Now we get into institutional and private scholarships, and these are merit or talent based. Now, these are awards where the FAFSA does not come into play yet, but we still mention it because they are what I call married to the financial aid office in the FAFSA. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Let me explain. So as your sons and daughters are applying to their colleges or universities, they're doing their admissions applications, their Common App, they're sending all their transcripts in, things like that. The admissions offices are evaluating them for admissibility at their particular college or university. At the same time, they're also looking at them perhaps for institutional merit or talent-based awards. Okay, they're looking at the factors that you see there: academics, SATs, you know, the high school they attended, you know, their athletic ability, if it's a Division I or II school, you know, diversity, legacy, if they have a talent, you know, a music talent, art talent, you know, dance talent, whatever. So they're looking at all these different factors, and these factors are all institutionally based. Okay, so one institution may weigh some factors heavier than the other, and institutions probably will not share, you know, the matrix they use to determine what factors are stronger for that school than others. But the bottom line is, as they're looking at your sons and daughters' file for admissibility, they're also looking at these other factors to determine, well, are we going to offer this student any institutional merit-based funding? Okay. The way we do it here at TCNJ is, as we're evaluating students for admissions, we're also reviewing these factors. Each factor has a different weight. And then we notify the student when they're notified of their admissions decision, if they're getting an institutional scholarship, how much. There's a contract involved. There's criteria that they must meet every year to get and maintain that scholarship, but our admissions office takes care of that portion. Then what happens is our admissions office notifies us in the financial aid office as to who is receiving a merit-based award. And then what we do is we evaluate the student's FAFSA results, and we determine that the student may also qualify for any need-based institutional awards. And then we kind of marry those two awards together, okay? So again, that's where I say that, you know, where the admissions and financial aid are married. So again, at my institution, we're looking, admissions is making the merit determination, and financial aid is making the need-based determinations based on the FAFSA results. And then we join those two awards together. They're separate awards, but we join them together. So different institutions may have different modalities or methodology as to how they evaluate that. But again, another reason to file your FAFSA, because if an institution requires that FAFSA data to make decisions about any institutional funding, you want to make sure that you've completed that FAFSA and submitted it by their deadline date, so you get full consideration for any aid that may be available to you at that school. All right, so again, besides all the other things that I mentioned and the student loans, this is a real key one here in terms of potential eligibility for funding or for financial aid funding. So section 2. In section 2, I'm going to go over different applications, okay? The main application is the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, but there are others. And my main recommendation here is that students go out to each college or university's website and determine what applications or application that school requires for financial aid eligibility and evaluation. And then obviously you complete that application by their deadline dates. Okay, deadlines are very important. I'll probably mention that a couple of times during the presentation, okay? So the first application I'm gonna cover is called the CSS profile. This is by the College Board. It is an extensive financial aid application. Nearly 400 colleges or organizations use the profile to determine how they're gonna award institutional funds, okay? Now, as a New Jersey student, if you were to stay in New Jersey studying, there's only one school in New Jersey that uses the CSS profile to determine institutional fund eligibility, and that is Stevens Institute of Technology. No other college or university in New Jersey uses the profile. So this is mostly geared towards those that are thinking of going out of state. For those students that are thinking of going out of state, you need to go out and review those out-of-state schools to see if they require the profile to apply for institutional funding. Again, the FAFSA, which is the next presentation, the next application I'm going to cover, is for the federal and the state and some of that other aid, the student loans and things like that. This is for institutional funds. Okay, so again, if you're staying in New Jersey, only one school, Stevens Institute, uses it. If you're going out of state, you need to check to see if they require this form. The profile is available October 1st, so it's been out there now for a few days. You can complete it, this weekend if you wanted to. It's more comprehensive in terms of the data that it collects than the FAFSA, and I give you 3 examples there. So, for example, the FAFSA is not concerned with your primary home, your parents' primary home. Your parents own their home, or are paying a mortgage, but they have significant equity on that home. The FAFSA doesn't care about that. The profile may request that data depending on the institution, because at some institutions, they may expect your parents to borrow on that equity to help pay for college education. The FAFSA doesn't require any information about your retirement accounts, like 401ks, pension, things like that. A profile school may request that data to make determinations as of any institutional funding. Not so much because they may expect you to borrow on that, but because they may say, well, how much are you contributing every year? Should you be contributing as much? Perhaps you need to ratchet back what you're contributing and use some of that funding towards your child's college education. And non-custodial parent information. So the FAFSA only requires information if you come from parents who are divorced or separated from your custodial parent, the parent who you reside with over 50% of the time. And if it's equal custody, then the parent who provides the most support, okay? So the FAFSA only requires the information from the custodial parent, not from the non-custodial parent. A profile school may require information from the custodial parent and the non-custodial parent. So again, you need to keep that in mind. Go out to each college and university to see if the profile is required from that particular school. The profile also aligns with the FAFSA's use of what they call prior year income. So the FAFSA, right now, the seniors who are listening to this, your FAFSA became available October 1st, just like the profile. That FAFSA is for the 2021-2022 academic year, which starts September of 21. That FAFSA is using yours and your parents' 2019 income information. So the income tax that you did for 2019, that's the income that it's using. The profile is doing the same thing. Okay, so keep that in mind. We'll talk a little later if the income has changed. The profile also differing from the FAFSA, the profile costs money. So that's why you definitely want to check to see which schools require the profile. And if you want the profile information to be sent to that school, so the profile costs $25, and that gives you one college. And then each additional college that you add to the profile costs you an additional $16. Okay, so unlike the FAFSA, which is free, the profile costs money depending on the schools you want to send it to. And the way it works is you go to their website, you register, you complete it, you make payment, you submit it, and then that information is sent to the colleges that you indicate on the profile. I've given you a screenshot of the website where you can go to complete the profile, and the custodial profile, if that's required of your school. You have their customer service number there. They even have a live chat. So again, after you check your particular school, if it requires the profile, go out and complete it, and here's some support information for you. Now, New Jersey, for New Jersey students who are undocumented. So in order to receive federal financial aid, the student is the individual that's applying for financial aid. So the student must be a U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen. In other words, they need to be here under a permanent status in order to receive apply and receive federal financial aid. But New Jersey is one of a handful of states that allows for undocumented students to apply for state financial aid only, okay? Therefore, there is a separate application for that student. So if there are any students listening to this who are undocumented, there is an option available to you through the state of New Jersey to apply for New Jersey state aid only. You have a snapshot here of what the application looks like. Some more criteria that's required in order to apply and potentially receive that funding. You see here, at the very bottom, the 3 programs that would be available to you as an undocumented student in New Jersey. So again, and I'm going to give you the website for them. I gave it to you 2 slides ago, but I'm also going to give it to you at the very end if this applies to you. But the FAFSA, this is the application that everybody, unless you're undocumented, will complete, okay? It stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. For 21-22, the FAFSA, again, as I mentioned before, is available October 1st, 2020. So it's been out for 5 days now. Some of you may have completed it, or some of you, will complete it soon. The FAFSA uses, again, what's called prior year income. So again, income information from the parent and the student for 2019. The FAFSA allows you to use what's called the IRS data retrieval tool, which basically allows you to connect directly through the FAFSA to the IRS website and import the tax information from 2019 onto the FAFSA. It is highly recommended that you do that. Financial aid administrators love it. And the reason why we love it is first, minimizes errors. And second, if you are selected for a process called review or verification or audit, we don't have to collect income information because you pulled it in directly from the IRS. So it really helps us out and it helps you out. Unfortunately, there are some tax filers who cannot use it, and that's if you do married separate or you amended your returns, or if you do a foreign tax return, you can't use it. But for other families, as you're doing your FAFSA, we highly recommend that you take advantage of this tool. And then that last bullet that you see on the slide, probably one of the most important bullets that you see there, you can apply and submit the FAFSA prior to your earliest school deadline. So again, your deadlines is something that I mentioned a couple of times during this presentation, and I always recommend you out and look at the different deadline dates. But what I suggest here with this bullet is if you're looking at 5 schools and the earliest deadline for all 5 schools for one school is December 1, do your FAFSA before December 1, put all those schools on the FAFSA, and then all those schools will have the FAFSA before their deadline dates. I hope that kind of makes sense. Since this is being recorded, it's hard to gauge feedback. But again, you can fill out your FAFSA before you've even applied to each one of those schools. And you just want to make sure that you've met the earliest deadline for all the colleges you're looking at. That way you've met all deadline dates. All right. The FAFSA, what does it do? Well, it collects the family's personal and financial information, and it's used to calculate what's called the expected family contribution, which we're going to go over in more detail a little later. You do it electronically. There are still some folks who do a paper FAFSA, but very old school. It's recommended that you do it electronically. I've given you the website there. You do it on the web at fafsa.studentaid.gov. The student and at least one parent must create what's called a federal student aid ID or an FSA ID. It is basically an electronic signature. Remember, the student is the individual applying for aid, so he or she will have to apply for an FSA ID. And at least one parent in the household will have to apply for an FSA ID. The one nice thing is the parent, if you have multiple children, your FSA ID can be used for all of their applications, but each individual child or sibling will have to do their own FSA ID. The FAFSA could also be done via smartphone or via a student aid app. So it's very device friendly, whether you do it through your phone, whether you do it through an iPad, whether you do it through a desktop, it doesn't matter. It's device friendly, so you'll be able to do it then. Also, going back to that FSA ID, FSA ID sometimes can be confusing to create. It is, again, part of that FAFSA process. You can create it before you do the FAFSA or while you're doing the FAFSA. And I'll be honest with you, the best way to create an ID is just to look at the instructions on the federal government site for on YouTube for creating an FSA ID. Nowadays everything is either virtual or recorded, just like this presentation. But I would probably recommend, when it comes time to create that FSA ID, spend a couple of minutes looking at this YouTube video from the federal government site. In addition, there's also a couple of other videos you see on the right-hand side there for filling out the FAFSA or managing student loans or things like that, which could come in handy to you at other times. So again, highly recommended that you take those steps and that you take your time when you're completing your FAFSA. Again, more general eligibility requirements for the FAFSA, and again, this is for the student since he or she is the one applying. The student must have a valid social security number. The student must be enrolled or accepted for enrollment in an eligible program of study. In other words, the student is going to college for a reason, to get a degree, to get a certificate, a diploma in some kind of trade or major or career. They're there for a purpose. I mentioned this before. The student must be a U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen. And for the males must be registered with Selective Service in order to apply for any federal benefit, including FAFSA, okay? Any 17-year-old seniors in the room, men, you can do your FAFSA and you can indicate on the FAFSA, register me for Selective Service when I turn 18, and FAFSA will automatically do that. Key components on the FAFSA, and I won't spend too much time, but basically the FAFSA is going to ask you for demographic information from the student. It's going to ask for student income and assets. It's going to determine the student's status by asking certain questions and whether the student will be considered dependent or independent, which means whether they have to provide just their information on the FAFSA or theirs and their parents' information. It's going to ask information about the parent, their demographic information, social security, things like that. It's going to ask for household size information, number in college. And on this slide, these are all components of the formula that determine eligibility, so very important. It's asking for parent income and assets, if anybody's receiving a federal means tested benefit. So again, all components of the formula. And lastly, that last hash there is you list all the colleges of interest up to 10 on the first submission. So again, want to spend a little bit of time here. So the FAFSA allows you to put 10 colleges per submission. So on your first submission, you will be able to put the 10 colleges that you're interested in going to. If there's 10, if it's 5, then great, but it allows you to do up to 10. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to have had applied to each one of those schools. It just means these are the ones that you're interested in. You may never end up applying to some of these schools that you put on the FAFSA, but you want to list a school even if you're interested or you're thinking of applying, or if it's a dream school or whatever. Because what it does is it allows that school to have access to your FAFSA data if and when you apply. Because the colleges are not going to do anything with the FAFSA data until the student applies and is admitted, okay? So again, you want to put as many colleges as possible. It's free. And like I said, you're allowed to do 10 on your first submission. But if you're interested in 15 colleges, or if you do your first initial FAFSA with 10 and then you think of another school or a new one comes to mind, or you visit a new school and you want to add them, all you have to do is go back to your saved FAFSA. The FAFSA data is saved it's saved until June 30th of 2021 for the current freshman. So it's going to be sitting out there. Once it's processed and sent to the schools, even if it's not processed, it just sits there, okay? You can go back at any time. If you make a mistake, you can fix it. And if you want to add more schools, you can fix it. What happens is, if you want to add more schools, you go in there, you delete the schools that you have on there, you add the new schools, and you resubmit your FAFSA. Within about 72 hours, the new schools that you've added will now have access to that data. You can continue to do that as many times as you'd like, because like I said, until you are admitted at a school, the school is not going to do anything with that FAFSA data and prepare an aid package for you, which is what we're going to cover in the next section, okay? So don't be afraid to go log back in there and change schools or add more schools if it's required, or if you are now interested in applying to new schools. When you are done with the FAFSA, it gives you a confirmation page. Although all of the FAFSA information is going to be sent to the email address that the student uses to apply, there's certain documents that I always recommend, and this is where maybe I'm a little old school, that you print out and you save. This is one of them, or at least do a screenshot and save it something, keep hard copy. And that's why probably it says print this page real clear there. This is kind of like your receipt that you've done your FAFSA. It's your confirmation. It's got a confirmation number on the top. It's got what's called a data release number, which is unique to you, the student who is applying. It tells you what happens next. And then on the bottom, it tells you that family contribution, which we're going to cover in a little bit. It tells you kind of like if you qualify for a Pell Grant, how much they're estimating. If you qualify for a loan, how much they're estimating. So this is just a good document for the student to have. Plus, if for some reason the school does not receive your FAFSA data, or something happens, or you're not sure if you added that school, this data release number here is unique to you. You can call a school and give it to them, and they will be allowed to then go into your FAFSA data and say, we are requesting the FAFSA data for this student. Okay, so again, good document to have, and I highly recommend that you print this out. Additional documents. So when the FAFSA is received by the federal government, the state government, each college, those entities may require additional information from you in order to be able to process your record or evaluate, the types of financial aid you receive. So in the case of the federal government leaves it up to the schools to enact on their behalf. Okay, so what do I mean by that? If the federal government requires more information from you to process your financial aid, most of the time they will tell the school, please follow up with the student, request additional data from the student. They may also, request it in certain cases, but they will always request for the school to follow up. So I've given you an example here of if the college or if the federal government is telling us that we need to collect more data on your behalf in order to process your aid, what we will do is we will send you an email. In some cases, we send hard copies prior to you being accepted. But if not, we will send you an email saying, hey, this is from TC&J. We need the following information from you in order to be able to process your aid. we would then, once we receive that aid, be able to complete processing of your aid and determine how much you may qualify for, okay? So again, just keep in mind that you may submit your FAFSA data, but if more information is needed, either the school will reach out, either on their behalf or on the federal government's behalf, okay? And you may start to receive either emails or letters saying, we need more information, please respond, okay? Now that's in terms of the federal government and the school. The state of New Jersey works a little differently. The state of New Jersey, they're gonna receive that data. Remember, let's go back to that first slide that you saw. The state of New Jersey is receiving this FAFSA data. If they need more information from you, the state of New Jersey will reach out to the student directly. So unlike the school and the federal government, who will reach out to the student, each entity reach out to them through the school, the state government will reach out to the student directly. The reason I tell you this is because sometimes what happens is students think that the email coming from the state of New Jersey is spam. You should always be wary of emails you receive that have your personal information, but just trying to give you a heads up that if you receive something from the state of New Jersey, it may look similar to this sample that I'm giving you here. They've received your information, you're applying for state aid, here's the next steps in order for us to be able to process your aid. So you can refer back to this presentation, but I've given you screenshots of the email that they send you. They're going to send you an email asking for it. The site that you would have to go to if you clicked on the link to establish a profile or create a profile for yourself in order to be able to upload any data that is required from the state from you. Okay, so I've given you kind of like just some sample screenshots of what it looks like. So in case you get spam or you think it's spam, or you're not sure, you can always refer back to this presentation to see, oh, let me check to see what the pages looked like when I heard about that financial aid presentation that night. Okay, so section 3, so the aid awards, okay? So this is where all those processes and things that I mentioned in the first 2 sections kind of come together, okay? So you saw that, there's different applications for you to apply. You're gonna check with each school to see which application they require, if it's just one, the FAFSA, or they require additional applications like the profile or perhaps an institutional application. You saw that by completing those forms, you're going to be evaluated for, it's going to be sent to different sources and you're going to be evaluated for different types of aid, okay? So after all that is said and done, then here's kind of like the steps that take place in order for you to receive your financial aid awards, or as they used to be called, financial aid packages, okay? So as you are admitted to each college and university then goes out and looks to see if a FAFSA was sent to that school on your behalf. Once they receive that FAFSA data, they're doing a couple of things in the background before they can package you for financial aid. First thing they're doing is they're establishing what's called a cost of attendance at that school. Okay, each school has different costs of attendance. The tuition and fees that are charged at that school, the room and board, things like books and supplies, equipment, transportation, personal expenses that you will incur there. If you're going to borrow on loan, are there loan fees involved? If you're going to be studying abroad, let's say during your junior year, because this is done every year, are there going to be additional fees for you to go to the study abroad program? Do you have health insurance? Do you need health insurance? All the expenses that are part of studying at that school during that first year. Again, you apply every year. Cost of attendance is established every year, okay? So they look at all, these are some of the factors that they're gonna look at and they establish that cost of attendance. So that's step 1. Step 2 is the results of the financial aid form, okay? Specifically, we're looking for that expected family contribution, or EFC. It is the basis of the aid package. It's based on a formula that's used by the federal government, and the state has their own formula in order to determine perhaps the amount of financial aid that you qualify for. And these are the guidelines. The EFC and financial aid are the guidelines that the schools use to determine that aid package. All right. So step 1 is that cost of attendance. Step 2 is pulling in that FAFSA data to determine what financial aid you qualify for. So I've given you kind of like a sample EFC for the Smith family, so you get an idea kind of how it works. Family lives in New Jersey, parents are married. So the household is four, mom, dad, two children with one going to college. Their 2019 adjusted gross income was $140,000 for that year. They have $20,000 in assets, probably in savings, and the student had no income and assets. So this family, once that formula, all the factors were looked at, the federal government determined that the Smith family can contribute $20,830 towards the student's first year of college. Okay? So once we have that data, we establish what's called financial need for the Smith family. Okay? So you see on the top of the slide here, you have the different colleges or universities. You have a community college, you have a state college or university, you have a private college or university. Okay, so these are the three types of institutions. Most schools fall into one of these three. The first thing we look at is, again, that cost of attendance, or COA. That's step one. How much does it cost to go to that school per year? Tuition, fees, room, board, transportation, miscellaneous, etc. What does it cost? That's the first thing. The second thing we look at is the results of the FAFSA, the expected family contribution. That is the constant. No matter where you go to school, nationally, college, university, type of college, no matter what, we look at the EFC, the results of the FAFSA. And then from that, we establish what's called financial need. What is the Smith's family need at each one of these schools based on the cost of attendance minus the EFC? So we see the first example here, community college. We know that the Smith family can contribute more per year than that it costs for their son or daughter to go to that school. Therefore, this student has no financial need. Therefore, the school has no responsibility to basically find financial aid for the student. He has no need, okay? I'll get to a second if you, for some reason, get a scholarship, but, so no need for this student. Then we look at a state college and university. We see now a little bit more expensive. We have room, we have board, we have meal plan, things like that. So it costs $25,000 on average to go to the state college or university. The family can contribute $20,830. Therefore, their son and daughter, the Smith family son and daughter, has need of $4,731. So our goal in the financial aid office is to try and find the Smith family $4,731 in financial aid to meet their need. Okay? Now, let's say we find the student $5,000 in financial aid, in need, okay, in financial aid. Depending on the type of need, the student may be eligible for that $5,000, which means that then not only have we found the student $4,731 to meet that need, but then any excess is going to meeting the family's contribution. So that's kind of like a perfect scenario, okay? So not only has the college met the student's need, but they've also kind of eaten away a little bit on the family's contribution, all right? It's a little bit more clearer on this scenario over here where, the private university or college costs a little bit more, and that's because they're not being subsidized by the state government. So, they're kind of on their own. Therefore, their tuition is going to be a little bit more expensive. Their EFC, is the one constant. So that financial need is greater for that student. Now, this is not to dissuade you from looking or applying at a private college university. And that's because, a private college university understands that the need may and will be higher at that school. So therefore, they will need to be more generous with their institutional funding to help meet the need and that cost of attendance at that school, okay? So I'll give you a couple of scenarios here because, again, being recorded, I know you don't have an opportunity to ask these questions, but so let's say, we've only been able to find $20,000 of this family's financial need. So the college struggles hard. They're looking at all their options and they're only able to find 20,000. So you still have some exposure here. That's when you should meet with the financial aid office and go, look, you know, we received your aid award. We know we had 24,000 in need, but you're only able to find us 20. What other options do we have for that additional 4,846? Okay. In most cases, the only option available may only be a student loan. But again, it's time for you then to call or meet with that school and go, what other options do we have? So you can be well informed about your options. Okay. What sometimes also ends up happening is, let's say we go back and the college says, well, your financial need is 24,846. We have found you enough financial aid, excuse me, to meet that $24,000 need. But then the family turns around and says, well, look, you know, we're having problems with this number, with the family contribution that FAFSA expects us to contribute. We don't know how the formula is based. We don't know how it came up with that amount, but it's just not realistic based on our family circumstance. And again, that's something that you should meet with the individual college or university, and they may say, well, let's see what options we can find to help meet some of that family contribution. But again, I could probably tell you that 99% of the time, this option will probably be student loans, whether it's loans in the student's name or in the parent's name or both, okay? So again, just keep some of those things in mind, but these are the steps that the colleges go through in terms of evaluating the student, determining need, and then preparing a financial aid award. And it all basically leads to this, the award notices, okay? So sometime in late winter, early spring, again, after the student has been accepted, the student will begin to receive their award notices from the different schools. And I won't lie to you, it could get very confusing when these award notices are being sent to the students, okay? The reason for some of that confusion may be the following. First of all, the format may vary by institution. Some institutions may send an email that basically tells the student to log into their school portal and view their award notices online. Another school may do it the old-fashioned way, and they may send out an actual financial aid hard copy packet to the student's house with all that information in a big envelope. So again, they may be available hard copy and online. So that kind of sometimes confuses families. I'm looking at one online and I'm looking for one in hard copy. Again, it's available after the FAFSA is filed and the student is accepted. So again, more reason why it doesn't matter if you put 20 colleges, you will not receive award notices from the schools until after you file the FAFSA and put that school on and you have been accepted at that school. Okay, a school is not going to send you an award package if you have not been admitted. All right. It's used to compare aid packages. Again, sounds very common sense, but this is where I want to elaborate more on this. And the reason why I said was, this could get very confusing is because different schools may have different packaging philosophies. Okay. Some schools may say, well, if the student qualified for an institutional scholarship for, let's say, $40,000, some schools may say, well, we're going to split the $40,000 evenly into 4 years. So you'll get $10,000 per year. Some schools may front load that $40,000 and they may say, well, we're going to give the student $20,000 their freshman year, $10,000 their sophomore year, and then $5,000 junior and $5,000 senior. I would not agree with that packaging strategy, but perhaps a school may do that packaging strategy. But again, keep that in mind so that you really scrutinize these award notices, because you may get one from a school that evenly distributes their scholarships, and you may get another one from a school that front loads it. And if you're not reading that fine print, you may say, well, this award notice looks really good and they're covering a lot of my son and daughter's cost of attendance, but they're front loading you. So you're going to have to rely on less the next couple of years. While the one that's evenly distributing it, you can pretty much then do your budget for 4 years and count on X amount of money per year, as long as your son and daughter meets, the renewal criteria for that award, certain GPA, certain number of classes, things like that. Some schools package loans differently in their award notice. Some schools like my school, we only package you with the financial aid that the student is eligible for. So if the student is eligible for grants, loans, scholarship, things like that, we're only going to package with that. Another school may package with that, but they also may package with loans that the parent is eligible for. So again, keep that in mind when you're looking at two award notices. One may look like they're covering more, but it's because they're also relying on the parent to borrow a certain amount in student loan funds, while another school, even though they're covering less, they're only packaging based on the student's award eligibility. So again, take your time in reviewing these award notices. Make sure you read all the fine print, any conditions for renewal. Perhaps if you're being offered any institutional aid or whatever type of aid. And my default is always, if you're unsure about anything that's on the award notice, reach out to the school and just get clarification. Because again, your goal here is to compare, the 4, 5, 6 different schools that your sons and daughters might be applying to, and then weigh, all right, well, school A, which is their number one choice, is offering me X. School C, their third choice, is offering me a lot more than school A, but now we have to weigh those two into account. Well, do we want to go to the third choice school that's giving me more, or to the first choice school, which is giving me less? And then therefore we're going to have to, come up with it, with more funding to send my son and daughter to that school. Okay. The format, which is the first thing I mentioned here, may vary by institution. And here's the second thing I want to get to. So several years ago, it was actually under the Obama administration, they determined that award letters were very confusing to families. So they tried to standardize award letters. So the federal government came up with what at the time was called the Federal Shopping Sheet. They changed the name, now it's called the College Financing Plan. And you have a sample of what one looks like here. So they told schools, look, if we would prefer if you used a standardized award letter. So families are not receiving 5 or 6 different award letters with different formats, different packaging philosophies, things like that. The only problem was they made it voluntary. So a school can opt not to do this. So what happened was, for example, my school, TCNJ, we decided to use the college financing plan. So we use our own institutional financial aid award notice, but we also use the college financing plan. So if you are comparing us to a school that uses a college financing plan, you can compare apples to apples. If not, you're also receiving your standardized, the other award letter that we sent out. So we provide both of them. Again, they made it voluntary. Now, the state of New Jersey went one step further, and they said, you know what, we don't like the fact that this form is voluntary. So at least for the New Jersey schools, we are going to require that they either use the college financing plan to keep things uniform, or use what's called a New Jersey shopping sheet. So in other words, they're trying to say at least all New Jersey schools, please use the same one, all right? So for those students who are gonna be studying in New Jersey, when you begin to receive your award notices, you at least will be able to compare apples to apples, because we're all in New Jersey using the New Jersey shopping sheet or college financing plan. And some schools are using, maybe perhaps an additional form, but you'll be able to compare. Schools outside of New Jersey may not be using this college financing plan. They may still be using the, what I'll call old school award notice, okay? So just keep this in mind. So you may see 2 different award formats, depending on the school, depending on the state, things like that. So just keep that in mind. Again, my go-to here, my default is, if you're unsure about what you're looking at, or, about how it's been awarded or whatever, please call the school. Please call the school. We recommend that at my institution. We also recommend, if you're unsure, or you want to talk about additional planning, that you meet with somebody in the financial aid office to make sure that you kind of understand and you've exhausted all your options in terms of how you're going to pay for the 4 years of school. Okay. Other information: be proactive. So again, you want to be as up to date on those deadline dates, that you're applying in time, that you're completing your FAFSA in time, you're doing your college searches, so I've kind of given you the application cycle for a traditional school, a 4-year school, but understanding that community colleges and proprietary schools work a little differently, but I've given you like sample, so that way you become more self-aware of, oh, I should be on the lookout for my admissions acceptances now. I should be on the lookout for my financial aid award packages now. Again, because you're kind of aware that these things are happening between October and February, or you looked at the school's deadline dates and they've told you this is when our award notices go out, or this is when our admissions decisions go out. Okay, so be aware of that. Maybe even prepare an Excel spreadsheet if that's what it takes, if that's how organized you are. So you're aware of that. So October through February, all that is happening. February through May is usually when the schools are sending out their award letters, for financial aid. Usually they're sending their admissions decisions then, unless you're early decision or early action. But February through May is kind of like where a lot of the flurry of activity is going on. And again, the reason I tell you that is if for some reason your sons and daughters begin to receive their admissions acceptances or denials, or then they begin to receive their financial aid packages, but you kind of notice you haven't received one from one school, go out to their website or reach out to them and say, hey, look, I've received my other decisions or my other award notices. I haven't gotten yours. It could be something as simple as they've been trying to reach you or your son and daughter to get more information from you, or they just are not there yet. They haven't prepared it yet. So just, again, be proactive, be aware of those timelines, okay? So you're not caught by surprise. Some schools been trying to reach out to you for 2 months and you just did not know it. Special circumstances. So if you remember back, again, you can refer back to this presentation, many times. If you remember, we talked about the FAFSA and that CSS profile used 2019 income information in order to determine eligibility. And that's for next year. That's for 21, 22. So a lot could happen. And we see it right now, with COVID and a lot of furloughs and unemployment and things, businesses being impacted. So the FAFSA realizes that, the financial aid offices realize that a lot could happen between that tax year and that application year. So they have what are called special circumstances, okay? I've given you here in this slide some acceptable conditions for a reevaluation of a financial aid package. And I've given you the ones that are pretty much accepted at most colleges and universities, because this is very much a case-by-case done by institutions, okay? Each institution kind of does their own thing, all right? But I've given you the standard ones that pretty much most institutions accept, but that doesn't mean that there may be other conditions that a different institution accepts. So these are kind of like the standard ones for TCNJ. But for example, another school may say, well, if you're paying K through 12 private school tuition, we will consider that a special circumstance. If I'm trying to think, if they have unusual medical and dental expenses, that might be another one that school considers a special circumstance. My main thing that I want to get across to you is that, yes, there is a mechanism for reevaluating if you meet a special circumstance. The special circumstances do vary by institution, but it is up to you, the student and the family, to go out to the institution's website to see not only what the process is for a reevaluation, but also to see what are acceptable and unacceptable conditions, okay? The mechanism is out there. It varies by school, but it's up to you to do the research. Other resources. So again, as you are looking at your award notices, as you're looking at affordability, your acceptances, your desire to go to one school, you need to be doing what I call a 4-year plan. Am I going to be able to afford the first year? Am I going to be able to afford the second, third, or fourth? We don't just want to get you into the school that first year, and then we don't know how you're going to pay for your second, third, or fourth year. You need to be thinking about that at the get-go when you're making that decision. Can I send my son and daughter to this school? Am I maxing myself out on student loans that first year? Am I hitting my 529K plan my first year and I'm not going to have anything for second, third, or fourth year? So again, things like that you need to be thinking about. I would rather have that conversation, that unpleasant conversation with you that first year and say, I don't know if you can come your second, third, or if you can make it here over the 4 years, perhaps you need to rethink whether our school is the right fit for your family. I'd rather have that tough conversation up front. Perhaps you might not like what I'm telling you, but I'm trying to be as honest with you as possible, than to have you show up sophomore summer or junior summer and say, I'm maxed out. I can't afford to send my son and daughter here. I don't know what else to do. And for us to not have any options for you. And therefore you have to go somewhere else. We don't want that. So again, you need to be thinking about that 4-year plan. But with that, not all doom and gloom, you need to be thinking outside the box too. Look at all your outside scholarship opportunities and do that research. Campus administered payment plans are a very viable option where, as you're piecing all this aid together, loans, grants, whatever, what do I have left? Well, I could do a payment plan over 12 months, which then helps me defray that cost. I can afford that now. Campus employment, whether it's through work study or the student, working on campus to help defray some of that cost. And specialized campus opportunities. And I always tout, if you ever attend one of my presentations, I always tout the residential advisor opportunity. So for example, here at TCNJ, we hire residential advisors. Basically, they're responsible for a floor in a dorm. They have to be upperclassmen in good standing. So sophomore, juniors, and seniors are given preference. Good standing, meaning a 3.0 GPA. You have to apply for it like any other job. It is competitive. There's a lot of responsibility involved, but it looks great on your resume. And if you are able to land one of those jobs, you get to live in a dorm for free, and you receive a meal plan stipend while you're here on campus. That could be a $12,000, $13,000, $14,000 a year value at my school. So, huge impact in terms of being able to minimize that cost of attendance at the college by being able to land one of those jobs, you see? So again, kind of like very much outside the box, but, student ambassadors, tour guides, perhaps internships, perhaps a co-op 1 year so that you are working, so you're not incurring a lot of those campus expenses, and hopefully you're earning a little bit of money to help defray their costs. Moving off campus after a certain period of time because off campus might be cheaper for you, or even commuting. If commuting is an option for you, to be able to say, well, I'm commuting, I've significantly reduced my cost of attendance, and now I can afford to go to X school for the next 4 years, okay? Private scholarship searches. So again, I mentioned scholarship on my other slide, but I've given you some very reputable scholarship sites here. My main recommendation is go to the institutions that you're thinking of applying to or attending or have applied to, and research their scholarship opportunities, whether it's scholarship opportunities to their own site at the individual college, or whether they have links to outside scholarships that they have vetted that they know are reputable. If you went to the TCNJ page and you looked at private scholarships, I have about 17 pages in a PDF document that you open up with multiple scholarship sites that have been vetted by my associate directors as legitimate scholarship sites. In other words, they're not data mining. But don't be afraid to reach out to civic organizations that you belong to, or if you attend, a church or a temple or a synagogue, whatever your denomination is. Perhaps they offer scholarships, to members of that parish. The parents, reach out to your employer, go to the HR office and ask them if they perhaps have scholarship opportunities for dependent children of employees there. In other words, do not be afraid to ask. The worst that could happen is they say no. Best that could happen is they may say yes. As a matter of fact, we do in here is an application to apply. I'm also giving you some resources. Now, we know that with COVID and, the move to a lot of virtual, for example, this presentation, I wish I could be giving it to you live. There are resources available to you out there. This is one resource, NewJerseyFAFSAdays.org. It is hosted by the state of New Jersey, on their website. How to file a FAFSA, completing the FAFSA, how to create that FSA ID. They used to have FAFSA completion workshops where you can go to a site at a county and get help there. Those aren't happening this year because of COVID, but again, for those underclassmen, perhaps a junior or a sophomore who's listening to this, when your time comes, go back and refer to this site, because you may be able to go somewhere if you need help completing your FAFSA, or maybe even at your school, they may be able to host one. Federal grant program information. So again, there's resources out there. I know it's a lot. I know this presentation can be overwhelming. Please refer back to it, but these resources are available to you out there. And that your best resource is always going to be the guidance office at your high school, okay? And if they get stumped, trust me, they will reach out to assistance to one of us in the aid community. Again, more resources available to you. Again, through the state of New Jersey, they're the ones who gave me this presentation. You can go to their website and you see things like college cost calculators there, preparing for college, applying for college, saving for college if your parents are thinking about that for any younger siblings you may have. So again, resources that are available to you, take advantage of them. I've also given you contact information for HESA. It's called the Higher Education Student Assistance Authority. They are the New Jersey state entity for financial aid. If you have any questions about financial aid, any questions about your FAFSA, any questions about your state eligibility, you get stuck, on something, you want information about scholarships, whatever, here is their contact information. Here's their website, their customer care line. They're there Monday through Thursday, certain hours, Friday, certain hours, they provide publications in paper and electronic. So again, highly recommend that these services are available to you. Don't be afraid to reach out to them for help. And with that, again, I know this presentation is virtual. I'm sure you have questions, review the presentation again. If you still do have questions, what I would recommend is that you reach out to your guidance office. Again, they're the best source of information for you. If they get stumped, they will reach out, to individuals like myself, or, contacts that they have in the aid community to help answer those questions. Or again, you may, even after you have all those questions, be able to reach out to an entity like HESA. Have a 529 question or a special circumstance question, or, an investment question, things like that. You're always more than welcome to reach out to, one of the entities. And after you apply to the different colleges, universities, once they have your record, you can, call them up and ask them questions. Okay. So with that, I really thank you for taking the time to listen to this presentation. Again, I'm sorry it has to be virtual. Hopefully in the near future, I can come out to your school and we can do this in person. But again, I will send the school the hard copy of this presentation as well as this recording so that they can share it with you. And I wish you the best of luck to the seniors during your senior year and during your application process, not only for admissions, but also for financial aid. Have a great evening.